What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today I wanted to showcase my funniest, luckiest, and wackiest moments from this season in Marvel Snap in Deadpool's Diner. I had a lot of fun moments playing with this game mode and just wanted to showcase all of those in a video. You can see we are already up to some wacky things in this game, and this game just gets even wackier from here in just a moment. This is the deck list on the screen that I played with for all of the games that you're going to see throughout this video. It's a little bit old at this point. Wouldn't necessarily recommend this exact deck list today, but this is the list that I was playing for most of this season. I did make some changes. I put in Sersi. You're going to see the strengths of Sersi at some other points throughout this video. I have talked about that in some YouTube shorts as well, but this game gets really crazy here when Sersi activates, because that is going to, well, first off, I didn't know this interaction. Sersi is first going to transform Hawkeye into Beast, which is going to return all three of those cards to my hand, but then Sersi still activates. Pretty neat. Sersi's also going to give me an Absorbing Man, which I can use to become another Sersi. I played the Rocket Raccoon first, that way I could copy this Sersi, which I played second, transforming the Rocket Raccoon. Not a huge deal. It is pretty cool that I get to Colleen Wing the Wolverine that I Sersi'd and Beasted and all of that other stuff. But this game actually gets even crazier when I draw Dr. Octopus, which is, of course, no longer as good as it was when I recorded this game, but we're traveling back in time here, and this is one of the craziest Dr. Octopuses because it's going to take my opponent's entire hand, which is going to be really disruptive, but also is just very disruptive in the location that you play it. But this time it also gets to be disruptive in the other locations, not because of the Arnim Zola Human Torch, that's just kind of whatever, but actually because of this Nico, which goes demon mode on my opponent as they are about to play a Venom. So all of these cards that they eat up, this 10 power Venom becomes a 6 power demon, which is just great. My opponent does get to still destroy a Nimrod, but of course they're not going to have as many options going forward, and then they're going to retreat. And believe it or not, that was not even the craziest Dr. Octopus that I'm going to showcase in this video. We got some crazy games coming up. Most of these games I'm not going to showcase that much of, just maybe like 1 or 2 turns. Here we have a TVA game, so this one will be really quick, but I thought this one was just really impressive because you wouldn't expect to beat a Cassandra Nova in Wakanda as an Arishem player in a TVA game, but this deck with the extra energy is able to get it done, curve out nicely, White Widow into Agent Coulson into Enchantress, which allows me to play a turn 4 Nightcrawler plus Mockingbird on the cheap, and I actually even win this game on differential, as you're going to see, because my opponent uses Juggernaut to kick me out of New York. So it's just going to come down to differential. My opponent wins by 4. I win by 6, despite the Cassandra Nova. Really impressive. I wanted to showcase this game because it actually is sort of similar to a game that I made a YouTube short about. If you're not already familiar, I put out a bunch of Marvel Snap content as YouTube shorts as well, and all of those games are totally different than the games that you'll see in these videos. It's no repeats. The YouTube short content are their own games, and then the full-length videos, those are their own games too. So just kind of throwing out a bunch of stuff, and I made one about really obvious setups with Null. Playing Null kind of telegraphs the fact that you are then going to Shang-Chi, and that was initially my plan in this game too, except Wakanda is going to make things pretty tricky for me because basically my opponent can just play around Shang-Chi this game by playing their biggest card into Wakanda, and I'm basically just going to make a prediction here that I think my opponent is actually just going to play their Darkhawk into Wakanda, because that would be really bad for me. So I can't Shang-Chi in that location, but I can Rogue. And if they have specifically Darkhawk there and they don't play for Crown City, like, they are probably just going to win Mount Vesuvius, so I can't really go for that location. All I can really do is put as much power as possible into Crown City in case they try to be competitive over there, like moving over Nocturne or something could be weird. So that's what I'm playing around here, and primarily though, I'm playing around the big Darkhawk in Wakanda, and turns out that's actually all that my opponent has. Just a Darkhawk in Wakanda, so I am going to be able to beat that just barely, because we don't steal as much power as the Darkhawk was generating for them. We have a very small rogue Darkhawk here, but it's still enough to get it done, and then we also grab the win in Crown City for an easy victory. And speaking of YouTube Shorts, I have an alliance, which I recently talked about in a YouTube short, but I haven't brought it up in a proper video. So this is me saying, come join the Never Lucky Gang. Search it up in the Alliances tab in Marvel Snap. There's still plenty of room. Here's another game that I just thought was cute because we have both Thor and we have Lady Thor, which draws me Mjolnir and also winds up drawing me a Wasp. So definitely the best value Jane Foster that I've had while playing Arishem. And then on the final turn, I'm able to battle for all 3 locations, thanks in part to Null, again making an appearance, which this time actually has some power in it because of Hotel Inferno. Here's a fun one because I Lady Deathstrike to destroy a bunch of the cards that I got out there with Dr. Octopus, and then my opponent Shang-Chi's the Dr. Octopus, which is great because now I can bring back the Doctor with Phoenix Force. However, the Phoenix Force could also potentially bring back the Widow's Kiss. I wasn't fully thinking about that when I played the Lady Deathstrike, but I'm super happy to go for it here, and we roll the 50-50. That's going to give me another Dr. Octopus activation, and then from there, I can easily win. I've got Blob for the final turn as well, and we've already got their Shang-Chi. This game was really wacky because I'm going to Viper my opponent to give them back their Widow's Kiss, but then my opponent is going to Viper it right back to me just as I Loki to get another copy of Viper so that I can try to send the Widow's Kiss back again. We wind up both going for Dr. Octopus on this turn, actually. It was just a little bit cleaner to try to junk my opponent out of that location this way. And even though my opponent winds up getting 2 pretty big cards in that location, their Dr. Octopus is not going to be as good for them because that's going to grab the Viper, and then we'll lock my opponent out of Limbo. We're locked out of Collapsed Mine, but we've kind of run my opponent out of gas at this point, and I'll be able to refill my hand with Nick Fury, which will also win me Limbo, and I can also play a free Mockingbird, so I'm gonna be all right. They Shang-Chi, but they actually had priority because of all of their big cards being in Collapsed Mine, so that's not gonna be enough, and we'll take the win. I thought this game was really cool just because I was able to kind of make a neat puzzle come together where I still get the activation for Miss Marvel while also trying to make the most out of Silver Surfer, which I got from my opponent, and those are kind of a nombo because Silver Surfer just wants you to fill every location with a bunch of 3s, and Miss Marvel wants you to only have 1 3-cost card. But we can kind of overfill in the center location, not going to make full use of the Brood, and then put Silver Surfer as the first 3 over into Baxter Building, plus Absorbing Man to copy that into Weapon X Facility with Agent Coulson already a 3-cost card in that location. And then from here, I can fill out one of these 2 locations with Mockingbird. I figure Baxter Building probably better because it's an important location to win. So here's what I send, and my opponent actually has a pretty, this is an interesting game, I just think, because I thought I was going to win Baxter Building, and the other locations it looks like my opponent is contesting a little bit harder for, but I actually wind up losing in Baxter Building just barely because my opponent Red Guardians me here, which kind of makes this less exciting, but still I thought it wound up being exciting just because I lose Baxter Building just barely, but still win in the other two locations. This was a really wild final turn, and there's actually two different ways that I could play it here, but basically I can only play one 4-cost card, and I've got 4 different 4-cost cards in my hand, so I decide to play Shang-Chi. The other thing I could have done was Jubilee into Death's Domain. That probably would have won me the game also, but what I instead decide to do is lose Death's Domain, but also shrink my Warpath to play around my opponent's Shang-Chi. So I thought that was just a really cute idea there, and I wind up still grabbing the win over in the Compound and the Panopticon. Altar of Death always makes for some really spicy moments. In this game, I'm going to play a turn 4 Destroyer into Asgard. I won't be able to really draw any cards here because my hand's already full from Nick Fury, but this potentially denies my opponent some draws, and setting up with Destroyer first will then allow me to freely play my other cards in the subsequent turns. And I actually have a little bit of a combo here already. I have Hell Cow plus Hela, which I could potentially play both of them in the same turn because of Altar of Death. So all I need to do here is play 2 cards into Altar of Death, and then I will have 11 energy next turn. So I'm gonna set up here with Punisher plus Rogue, and then I'm gonna finish this game off strong with Hell Cow plus Hela, because that's just such a sweet opportunity. I can't pass it up. So here's where we're at, and unfortunately, Shang-Chi is not a good hit for me. Hell Cow is going to discard Mockingbird plus Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is the weakest card in my hand, and actually, if I could have just avoided the Shang-Chi, I would have won this game. But sadly, my opponent is actually going to just barely grab the win here. They get to do a bunch of fun stuff on the final turn as well because of Altar of Death giving them some extra energy. And this game is really close, but they are ultimately going to tie it up in Asgard and just barely grab the win over in Warrior Falls because Hela gave those reanimated cards -2 power, so Shang-Chi was only for 1 and Mockingbird just barely not enough, but so many other rolls would have won me this game. I did want to showcase some losses in this video as well. I know sometimes losses aren't that exciting, but losses were kind of free in Deadpool's Diner once you had enough bubs that you didn't care about losing them, either because you were going to regenerate them or because you were just like ping-ponging, but still, like, losing didn't reset your progress, so they certainly didn't feel as bad. And I had some fun losses that I wanted to showcase in Deadpool's Diner as well. This is also one of them. This is going to be a loss, and then I think there will be like one more loss throughout this video. But this game, this deck that my opponent was playing was just really cool, and I wanted to showcase it and give them some credit. I was able to luck out and get Miss Marvel into Sanctum Sanctorum, which means I've won that location probably, but my opponent is sort of a move deck, so I am a little bit afraid of Heimdall, and I do have some big power in the other locations too, so I kind of feel like I just have to avoid Heimdall here, and my opponent can also move over Dagger or Vulture, which the fact that they are moving into Kunlun means that they're actually a decent amount of power though as well, and the way that move cards work, those will calculate and move at the start of the turn, so even though I have priority, I can Shang-Chi in Kunlun. That should be able to win that location, and then I think I'm good with Miss Marvel Center, or if my opponent Heimdall's, then I think I'll have enough power in Aunt May's. And the play that my opponent comes up with here, is just crazy because they have it covered from all bases. Looks like I might go for the wave over in Kunlun. Yeah, playing around some other stuff. Doesn't really matter. My opponent's dagger gets absolutely huge. We're going to Shang-Chi that, which is cool that we get to Shang-Chi that. Wasn't totally sure on that. But then the other thing that my opponent does is they play Darkhawk, which is actually just going to crush me in Kunlun, despite all the work that I've put in there. But then they play Ghost Spider. And I just paused this for a second because I thought this play was so sweet. If I had Shang-Chi'd my opponent over in Aunt May's, then the Ghost Spider would have had room to pull over that Darkhawk and take that location from me. I actually would have won the game because the dagger would not have been enough over in Kunlun, but regardless, I just thought this was super sweet and a pretty unique deck, obviously capitalizing a little bit on Arishem being everywhere and punishing that with a little bit of a Darkhawk package, Darkhawk, Korg, and Rock Slide, but then supplementing all of that with this move package is not something that I had really seen before, so I just wanted to give some shout outs to my opponent here. A lot of fun stuff going on in this one. We kick it off with an Adam Warlock trigger, and then this is actually going to wind up being a big Sersi highlight as well. But we're going to kick things off with Man-Thing, which is looking really, really good in Quantum Realm. My opponent's cards are not big because it's Quantum Realm, and we'll be able to make them all basically non-existent. Though we wind up getting really, really unlucky because my opponent vipers and gives me the Hood, which is the absolute worst roll here. All of the other cards are 0 power, and the Hood is -5. So now I am losing in Quantum Realm, which is really awkward, but I do have Sersi to make up for it. I brought this up previously in a YouTube short, but the reason that I am playing Sersi is because of all of this junk that people are using to counter Arishem lists. And yeah, just being able to turn that junk into actual usable stuff is really good, but it's also a great way to bypass certain locations. Really, I mean, mainly Quantum Realm is a location that we get to bypass here, and then we're also going to grab some of my opponent's options with this Dr. Octopus. I don't think they're going to be able to beat a Mockingbird. I'm definitely going nowhere in nowhere, but I might be getting somewhere in Quantum Realm because I'm going to turn these negative power cards into actual threats. This is going to give my opponent 6 power in Quantum Realm, so I will have to beat that with whatever I get randomly off Sersi, because Sersi herself is going to just get her base power set to 2. We can see my opponent has a Copycat and a Jeff. That's not going to be enough, and Sersi gives me Nimrod and Grandmaster, so that is enough, and Sersi gives me the win. I also wanted to showcase this game, but unfortunately all I have is this screenshot. I ran out of storage on my phone because I was playing and having so much fun with DEADPOOL'S Diner that this screen recording did not save, but it was actually just like one of those fast forwarding animations because so much happened here. So basically all that was in play was my Squirrels and Jubilee and Quinjet, and then I played a Dr. Octopus into Camartage. And that got the Destroyer out for my opponent, destroyed all their other stuff, and then they doubled Dr. Octopus me, which brought out some stuff, and then Shang-Chi happened. Ultron obviously came out at some point during this, and then Sersi also came out for me and double Sersi'd everything, which also included Legion turning everything into Camartage. This was just an absolutely crazy game, and honestly, I can't even like totally make sense of it because where did the Ultron go? Ultron doesn't die to Shang-Chi, so I don't know, it had to like get Sersi'd away and then get Shang-Chi'd. I'm not even totally sure. If you think you know, leave a comment. But I'm at a little bit of a loss for words here, but did want to showcase this absolutely crazy screenshot, all just from one Dr. Octopus. This was a pretty clean win for me, but I did want to showcase a really cool play from my opponent. They Juggernaut into Necrotia, so they win that location, and then they move that Juggernaut into Angela. And you might be wondering why they did that. It was actually a really smart play to play around Shang-Chi by not growing Angela again. So huge props to my opponent. Unfortunately, that means that we tie in Wakandan Embassy thanks to my Iron Man, and I did win, but I thought that play was really cool. Here's another Vormir game actually that I thought was pretty unique because I win with a Tuma over in Vormir, and now I don't have to commit anything else over into that location. I don't wind up getting anything destroyed in Vormir. Otherwise, I would have gotten the Atuma destroyed as well. So just thought that was cool. My opponent has given me a green goblin, and they Viper a sort of lackluster Shadow King, and then they Spider Woman me with that Dr. Octopus turn. So I'm going to follow up with Sersi, which can clear up that location for me. It's a little bit awkward to Sersi my Dr. Octopus because that one in particular is probably getting worse, but I do get to turn Green Goblin and Shadow King into potentially relevant threats here. And now my opponent has to do something to win Dream Dimension and Vormir, and I just get to answer Cassandra Nova with Shang-Chi, so I'm able to grab the win. I just mentioned I was playing a ton during Deadpool's Diner. Here you can see just how much. I basically got up to 9 billion bubs, and this is probably where I'll stop. I'm not going to be able to get into the top 100. I tried. Honestly, I probably could have spent this time just grinding on the post-infinite leaderboard and getting into the top 100 there while everyone was distracted with the bub leaderboard. I tried to go for the title, just wound up being way too much, and then I had way too much content as well. This was initially supposed to be like 5 different videos at least. Broke some of it off into YouTube shorts, but you might be able to tell like some of these videos connect and or some of like these games connect. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to leave a like. I'm not done. I'm just kind of doing like a mid-video wrap up here. But if you enjoyed this content, leave a like. I do have some other Marvel Snap content coming up. I'll talk more about that, I think, towards the end of this video. But I also want to make sure next season, I mean, I've got content to round out the season right here, and then I'm going to have some content to kick off the next season. But I also want to make sure that I am prioritizing some content for some other games as well. Once Upon a Galaxy looks like it's a lot of fun. Want to make sure that I am playing that as well as some other games and just a little bit more variety here on the channel. But yeah, a lot of Marvel Snap was played by me this season, which isn't a bad thing. I had a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun with Arishem and with some of the crazy stuff that we got into with Deadpool's Diner. So let's showcase the final stretch here. This is going to be like at the biggest tables now. This game was such a bummer because I saw New York and I figured, well, I'm not going to be able to move Colossus later on, so I might as well just play it in New York. But then the third location is Rickety Bridge, which I could have won with Colossus, and now I can't. So definitely a little bit of a bummer. Don't want to play my Quinjet into Rickety Bridge or X Mansion either, so I played that into New York, and now I'm just totally junked out of that location. My opponent has already won it. They're going to continue to win it further with Nebula. So this is not great. They also get Scar out of X Mansion, so I'm really just getting hit from all angles here. But I do get to make a little bit of a solid move with a Dr. Octopus on turn 5, following up the turn 4 Leech. So some really big haymakers. Of course, we don't have access to these things anymore in Arishem, but for this video, we're going to enjoy them one last time here. Dr. Octopus gets rid of my opponent Shang-Chi, Viper, and Mojo. Goodbye. And this is still not looking great for me. My opponent is beating me by far on differential. However, Shang-Chi could kill Scar, and then I draw Bucky Barnes. So now I can Bucky Barnes to win in Rickety Bridge. I can Shang-Chi over in X Mansion, which actually won't even do it because my opponent's gonna move that Scar over into X Mansion and then just play for differential. My opponent only had one play off the top, so they're gonna destroy Rickety Bridge, make this into a differential game, or at least so they thought. But when the Winter Soldier comes back, we actually get to win in Rickety Bridge, and we've already won in X Mansion as well for 204 million. That's the max that you can win in Deadpool's Diner. But I think this was the most impressive Dr. Octopus that I have seen because, well, it is gonna get Shang-Chi'd, but that's kind of okay for me because then this Venom is bigger and my opponent gives me this Venom, which is really sweet. And we also have the Nexus as one of the locations in this game, which is a little bit awkward because I have not put any power there yet, but I have multiple ways that I can get in there. I can Arnim Zola this Venom over, but I can also use Heimdall to win the Nexus on the final turn, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go for a sneaky Heimdall. Don't want to play it yet, just want to set up this turn, which I guess just means like Spectrum over into the Nexus. And then on the final turn, it is Heimdall for the win. We know my opponent can't null. They can death, but the fact that they don't even have access to null because of Dr. Octopus is just gonna make this an easy W there. Two fun things happen in this game. We get the turn 3 Jubilee into Odin, which re-triggers the Agent Coulson, but also re-triggers the Jubilee and grabs me Arishem on the turn that my opponent tried to Green Goblin me. Way too slow to try to Green Goblin turn 3 against an Arishem deck, but my opponent had no other locations they could play it. If they played it in Aunt May's, it became a 0 power Green Goblin, and they couldn't play it in Sanctorum. So pretty awkward. And now whatever we play in Aunt May's will guaranteed go over to Sanctum Sanctorum. I was thinking about playing Namor this turn, but ultimately, I mean, when you can, why not just Dr. Octopus? So that's what I'm going to wind up going for. My Dr. Octopus finds their Dr. Octopus, which finds my Professor X. So we both wind up being locked out of Aunt May's. However, because of the change to Professor X, my Dr. Octopus still gets out of there and into Sanctum Sanctorum. So I'm gonna win the center location regardless. And with my opponent taking all the big cards from their hand, I don't think they're going to be able to grab the win still in Triskelion. So we're going to stay in it. I think my opponent was hoping that, I don't really know what they were going for here because they played the Shang-Chi early. I have 6 and 7 cost cards over in Triskelion, but they're not Shang-Chi-able, so we grabbed the victory. This game was a lot of fun because we were able to give them the Void with Oscorp Tower. I thought that was sweet, but also because my opponent has Cassandra Nova, Darkhawk, and then they're also going to Mystique this Darkhawk on the final turn. But Absorbent Man on Blob beats Mystique on Darkhawk. So yeah, this was just a super satisfying victory to be able to beat all of these cards. Plus my opponent had Cosmo, so I couldn't even like play my tech. I didn't have Shang-Chi or Shadow King here, just Cannonball, but still we were able to get it done. In this one, my opponent Red Guardians my Iron Man, which is kind of a bummer. I do Shang-Chi their Cassandra in the same turn, so not the worst. And also, Iron Man getting Red Guardian here means that I can still Sersi it. So that's what I'm gonna do. I also set up with my Dracula in that center location because that got a negative debuff from my Celine, but I'm going to wipe all of that away and get a bunch of surprise power out there into Hala for the final turn, which I thought was really fun. My opponent also had a Darkhawk in this one, so I beat Cassandra Darkhawk here, which again, yeah, always feels great. This game was actually played after the OTA with a different deck list even that I will showcase in tomorrow's video, but I just thought this game was so cool that I wanted to showcase it here in this one because I make an extra Maru Masa Shard with Dakin, and I also make another Hell Cow. So on the final turn, I can play both of these Hell Cows and quadruple up my Dakin. Unfortunately, not gonna have any way to beat my opponent's Darkhawk over in Murder World though. And this opponent was also going, this player does not like Arishem. You might be able to see their name at the top of the screen. They had a Mystique and then also a Cassandra, which unfortunately just made them a little bit too big for me to beat in Attalon, even though this Hell Cow is able to grab double Maru Masa Shards to put Dakin up to 16. The Cassandra is just barely too big, and the Athena also grows, and so we get the defeat. There are definitely some mixed opinions on Arishem, but I love it. I'm playing him because I think he's fun, but obviously he's also very powerful, and because of that, we can see a lot of these opponents are playing hate cards against Arishem, even though it's maybe not as good as it was. People are still packing the hate, so you gotta have the tech for the hate sometimes. And I thought this game would be a really fun one to end on here as well. Turn 3, we have Castle Blackstone, so I decide to battle for that location with Jubilee. And while I do win that location, I also lose my Shang-Chi in the process, which is really awkward because now I don't have that important tech piece in order to win. But there's a lot of other stuff going on in this game. Eternity Range gave my opponent a rock, plus we all have a bunch of squirrels, and I can use Dr. Octopus to just junk my opponent up just a little bit more. So that's what I'm gonna do now on turn 4, and we get their Darkhawk and we get their Shang-Chi. So, you know, I'm not super happy ever to see Darkhawk, but at least we now know that they have it, even though I can't Shang-Chi it. A little bit awkward, but I do still have an idea for how we might be able to win this game. So my opponent basically does not have any room left on the board. They can move around Jeff, they can bounce in their Angelo location with their Kitty Pride, but if we magic and make a whole nother turn happen on this game, I don't think my opponent is going to be able to capitalize on that as much as we are going to be able to be. So I magic to give us limbo and try to buy some time so that I can come up with a way to win this game. And unfortunately here, I do not come up with anything. I draw Orca, and so now what I'm thinking is I really need to find a tech card off of Agent Coulson. Nick Fury really does not have that much tech available, so I think what I have to do here is play Agent Coulson, try to get like a Shang-Chi off of him, and see if that's good for me. I was deliberately going for that this game, and I'm also going to play my Mockingbird now, so that way I can also draw one card off the top of the deck on turn 7. My opponent's just going to continue to play Kitty Pride, and we are going to Agent Coulson here. I also have to hope that this Mockingbird is just going to be enough But there you see, I got it. I got the Cannonball, which was the perfect card to finish off here. And then I'm also just going to throw Martyr into Castle Blackstone. But I think my opponent's big cards are out of the way. They played their Darkhawk, they played their Cassandra. So I think we've won in Central Park despite the Kitty Pryde Angela shenanigans. And Cannonball will actually be allowed, will be enough to destroy my opponent's Darkhawk. By the way, my opponent actually wins this game if they just skip this turn, because then we send the Darkhawk over into Central Park. But I'm going to assume they're still going to make a play. They're actually going to just fortify themselves over in Castle Blackstone against a Shadow King. But that's not what I got. I got Cannonball, baby. And we're going to take out that Darkhawk and take the victory. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.